Hi, my name's Patrick Lawrence. I'm the CEO at First Step in St Kilda. With International Harm Reduction Day fast approaching, it's a great time to pause and think about what is harm reduction, why do we do it, and does it work? I want to look at some other examples in the community outside the alcohol and other drug space for a moment. Let's take the example of car ownership and car driving. Now, we all know that this is a very dangerous activity and it kills people every year. Do we lock people up for wanting to do it? No, we don't. We regulate. There are all sorts of laws and regulations around who can own cars, where they can be driven, how they can be driven, ages, speed limits, etc., etc. There is innovation, seatbelts, generally safer cars, airbags, safer roads, bumper strips, etc., etc. I mean, there are hundreds of examples, and we educate. There is a broad, ongoing campaign to educate the community about safer car ownership. Let's look at a slightly more niche area or smaller area of the Australian community. There will always be people who feel that they need guns. Farmers are the classic, relatively uncontroversial example, and people who want to own guns. Do we lock them up because this is a fundamentally dangerous activity? No, we don't. We regulate about the production and sale of firearms, ages of people who can use firearms, licenses, etc., etc. We innovate around safer guns, safety switches, gun lockers, and other pieces of technology, including a massive database of gun ownership. And we educate at least the relevant sectors of the community about safe gun ownership and how to control those guns more broadly. What about alcohol? There have always been people who want to get intoxicated and who want to drink alcohol. Those two things not always being the same thing. Do we lock them up? Because this is a fundamentally dangerous activity that can leave you exposed to harms and can indeed actually kill you. No, we don't. We regulate around the production and sale of alcohol, how old people can be when they buy it, where they can consume it. We innovate in the areas of making it very clear for anyone who wants to know how many standard drinks they might be consuming at any given time. We have breathalysers, we have various other pieces of equipment and technology that help us keep drinking to be as safe as we can make it. And we have public education campaigns. Plenty of people might argue that they could be better, but I think everyone out there understands that overuse of alcohol, however we might define that, can be a dangerous and potentially life-threatening activity. All the innovations I just talked about across cars, guns, and alcohol, none of them are punitive, and they are all designed to minimise pain and suffering. It's a sensible approach in the main. Do we take the same approach to what we call illicit drugs? Of course, in the main, we don't. The underpinning platform there is illicit. Their use is criminalised. We won't go into the history. This is meant to be a very short video here. But fundamentally, due to your drug of choice, your daily or weekly life can actually land you in legal limbo. It can screw your life up. It can lead you to be incarcerated, to lose your children, to lose any hope of employment. We are not employing those same approaches. But let's look at harm reduction. Let's see what is happening in those three spaces. With harm reduction, there's a lot where regulation meets innovation. For instance, drug courts, drug diversion courts, where people are not being directed towards incarceration, they're being directed towards support and rehabilitation. We think about needle and syringe programs, the actual technology itself, and the regulation about the provision and funding the provision of needle and syringe programs, really key. We look at pill testing, very controversial area. Won't surprise you to know that I am very behind pill testing, along with so many of everyone who works in this field, really, in pill testing at festivals. We look at overdose reversal technologies, naloxone to reverse opioid overdose, to save a life. We now have a nasal nasal thing. You press the button. It's very effective, very easy, and saves lives. We look at peer support networks and the funding of those peer support networks. That's a regulation issue. We look at one of the old harm reduction techniques where regulation meets pharmaceuticals, and we have the provision of opiate substitution therapies that really do alleviate pain, suffering, sickness, and death, such as methadone. So what we need to be doing and need to be thinking about as International Harm Reduction Day comes around is more of these kinds of regulation, innovation, and We need community education, not punishment. And then, like the other things we talked about, the focus will not be punitive. The focus will be on minimising harm and suffering, and that's what it should all be about.